we currently have 6 people, and I think that's a quorum, certainly, to further this conversation, which, as you, some of you know who were on last month's call, we started this exploration of diversity, inclusivity, and equity. And this is a committee that is still very much in its infancy in terms of, hey there, David, in terms of deciding the breadth and scope of what we want our role to look like. I have some notes, but I intend for this to be very collaborative, so that all of us can help to shape it. There you are. Hi. So one thread of conversation that we just sort of started talking about with Cinda joining us is that she was just named the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion chair for her club, and one of the topics of discussion is what role that person ought to play, and also who should it be in each club who is our liaison, so that we can disseminate information to them and have them be our ambassadors, so that all 48 clubs have, you know, some communication from the district on issues relating to diversity, etc. Do you all have any suggestions on, you know, who that person should be within each club, and what the best way to get the ball rolling might be?
Probably we need to ask the presidents to take that responsibility up front to begin with, and then let it. I think it does need their, you know, if the club's robust enough to handle, you know, identifying an individual, then they should do that. But I think it could default to the president, at least to start, because there's some things that we need to do this year. Like, we need to get the presidents to update their constitution and bylaws to reflect the diversity statement that was adopted by RI. And so that needs to happen.
Okay.
And that's going to be something that we present at PETS.
Okay.
And, but, you know, if they're a big enough club, then you know, they've got enough people, then certainly they could have an equity officer.
David, for the Hickory area, there's a great enough concentration of clubs here between the 5 clubs plus Lincolnton plus Sherrills Ford. I think we might find that it works here, because it has worked for Rise Against Hunger. It used to be Stop Hunger now. To have a person in the area that's going around to the other clubs and sharing and proposing and presenting. And I think we may find that that'll work here in the Hickory area.
Does this, do you think this falls under membership? Or is it a standalone? Or what?
My bias.
What do you
my
guys
bias. I think the subject is important enough, and I tried to tell the folks at the club this morning that it should have the same status as a foundation chair or a sergeant at arms. It is a club administrative position.
So, Robert, you think it makes sense to designate a new role within the club context, as opposed to saddling the membership chair that already has that role? Okay.
It deserves singular attention.
Okay.
And like David said, we'll not only include it in the update of our bylaws, but we'll, I started to look at that today, and that was how to add that chair in DAC-DB to the club structure.
Okay.
And I think by having it as a separate thing, that will ensure continuity as well.
Yes.
That makes sense. Taking notes here. So then, it would take reaching out to all 48 clubs and having them at their next board meeting, start talking about this. David, is this something that can be reinforced at PETS in terms of the incoming presidents to say we expect you to to have a diversity chair in place by July 1st, the beginning of the Rotary year? Because it'll take some time for them to go through that process.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to it. The idea would need, I think we need a description of what that person does and, what their role and responsibility looks like.
Right.
And because I think that's the first thing that the presidents are going to ask is, okay, we'll have a chair. What are they going to do? Like, what do they do? So, I can think of some things that they might do, but another thing that's coming down the pike is the harassment policy.
Okay.
And so that'd be another thing that might fall into there. And I think youth protection might even be something there, because.
Tell us about the harassment policy. I'm not aware of anything brewing with that.
Well, there's a harassment policy that has been adopted by RI, and it not only recognizes the forms of harassment, and it's very broad in definition, but it outlines the potential, I guess. It's not real specific, but it does outline, a procedure if there is a harassment claim. And so it's, like how it elevates in terms of severity. So like, if it's just somebody telling some jokes or something, that might be a reprimand or, a conversation. Whereas if it's, something more egregious, then it could elevate to, RI involved or district involved.
David, did that text language come out of a Council of Legislation session, or did it come out of the Secretariat?
I think I want to say it's Council of Legislation, but I don't know the answer to that question right off the top of my head.
I just wondered, because normally when they
I know it's a
make
board
a
level
pronouncement, they write it up.
It's board level, like RI board.
Yeah, okay, Secretariat, okay.
Okay. I see that a couple more people have joined us since we started chatting here tonight. I just wanted to acknowledge you and say hi and welcome. Could you introduce yourself? I'll start with phone number ending in 9959.
Yes, Steve Hunt, Hickory Sunrise.
Oh, there you made it. Oh, hi, Steve. Nice to see you here.
I apologize to you. I got sidetracked and time got away from me, but I'm here and I'm listening to some very interesting conversations. But go ahead. I'll get the other person.
Glad you're here. And then we have another participant. Would you introduce yourself? It says iPad. It doesn't tell us who you are. Yes.
Oh, that must be me. It's Cinda Bollinger.
I
have
okay.
Dial in on my phone. Yeah.
You're under
I'm
iPad.
on my phone, but I'm connected on my iPad.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that very much.
So we got you twice.
I think it's you twice too. That's what it is then. Okay. So it seems the consensus is that we will encourage each club to nominate a diversity chair within their club, and let's talk about what we think the role of that position ought to be. If you can chime in with some ideas that could help us start to frame.
Can we back up a second to a statement David made? Because after I thought about it, it's doggone powerful, and it lends itself to what our objectives focus needs to be, and that is, you go to the presidents and you tell them, until you have a designated DEI chair, it's you. And the two things you have to get done is you have to get your bylaws updated, and you have to get your youth protection consistent with RI policy.
Okay. I'm taking notes here. Protection.
Yeah, I'm not sure that at this point, David, I'm not sure that that's negotiable. I think that the matter of legal liability and reprehensible behavior is strong enough that it needs to be just like paying dues. If you don't pay your dues, you're not in. If you don't participate in this, you know, you're not there.
Okay. Okay. Well, that sounds like a good first step. What is the most effective way to communicate that to the clubs? Is that, David, in your opinion, is that an email that might get lost in the shuffle? Is it 5 people on this?
I think we're gonna. I've got a whole. It doesn't sound like much, but I got a whole 10 minutes in the pets. Like it's a thing. It's a part of the pets training.
Okay.
All devoted to diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah.
So there's room there where we could promote the idea of an officer.
So
again, I think if we get this role defined.
A pet's line
And
item.
Yeah,
Right.
at this point, because when I formulated that agenda, I did not have this committee.
Yeah.
So now that we have this committee, we can make it a little more robust. At that time, it was going to be, we're going to discuss the harassment policy, and we're going to discuss the equity, inclusion,
Youth
diversity
protection.
statement.
Youth protection.
Youth protection is going to be talked about. So those things are, and we say youth protection, but it's really vulnerable persons.
Okay.
And that's something that I have. That's something that I promoted when our district adopted the latest policy. We actually created a policy for vulnerable persons, and that includes youth. But it also includes elderly. It includes, mental and physical disability. So it includes. It's much more inclusive than just youth. So when we talk about youth protection, it includes that as well.
As a point of
And so yeah, we
clarification-
can do that. I'm sorry, I'm
Go ahead.
but we can promote this at Pets.
You bet.
And I want to do that. The main thing is we just need to have a clear definition of that role and responsibility.
Right.
I think one thing that just to kind of start, and I know we already started, one thing would be to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the club, and to promote the integrity of that diversity, equity, inclusion statement. And I think to provide a channel, a point of contact in the club if there are issues surrounding diversity, equity, inclusion, harassment, youth protection, anything like that, that there's a person there who's approachable and can assist with the protocols.
Okay.
And I think that's an important distinction. They need to be approachable.
Right.
A person like that, a person in that role, it doesn't need to be an authoritarian necessarily. It needs to be somebody that's kind-hearted and easy to talk to.
And active in the club, someone who shows up, who has a pulse on the dynamics of the club. Ideally, it's someone who's pretty involved.
I'm not sure that easy and kind-hearted necessarily is a requisite for the person that they need to be empathetic. They need to be able to recognize and feel what others are subject to, because
right.
we had that discussion today at club because of the upcoming recognition of the Selma March and some of those things. And there are instances where the dominant party in the club may not recognize what the minority party is feeling when they get hit with something like that.
Right.
We're talking about
That's
that
true.
some things just aren't seen the same way because you're not looking through the same eyes.
Well, look, may I chime in here?
Yeah, sure.
I
course.
think Bob knew I was going to chime in here. David, please, again, I apologize for my late getting in. Please tell me your roles.
My role, I'm the district governor-elect. I follow Tiffany.
Okay. And the person that's facilitating, I saw your name earlier, but and you're the person in the district that's facilitating this whole piece?
Yes. Hi, Steve. My name is Gaia
Hi.
Goldman. I am the past president of the Rotary Club of Asheville South, and I'm the chair of the newly created DEI committee.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me just tell you, I've been a Rotarian now going on, 26, 27 years.
Uh-huh.
And I was in a previous club, and I must tell you, that 1 hour a day, I was the only person of color, and that 1 hour a day, even though I was sitting at a table full of people, was the most lonely time in my whole day.
Amen.
Sorry to hear
Okay,
that.
that's okay. You know, I'm
Yeah.
pretty thick-skinned, so I'm
Well,
okay
that's
with
why
that.
we're here, you know.
I wouldn't still be a Rotarian.
Mhm.
But let me tell you some of the things that we must address going forward, and that are things like implicit biases.
Mhm.
That bias that operates beneath the consciousness level, and people do it and mean absolutely no harm. You know, and we all have them. And the things that and the thing we have to do moving forward, everything that we do has to be intentional.
Mhm.
We can't assume that things are going to happen. And I totally agree with you, David, that this person must be a person that's approachable, and people
Right.
need to be able to come to them and talk with them. At one point in the short history of our club, which is now, gosh, what, 20 years?
Just
Bob?
that. Yeah, just that 20.
Yeah, just that 20. We have been known as the Rotary, the United Nations of Rotary, because when I left the club that I was in, I was determined if I go back into another club, we're going to have diversity, and diversity from more perspective than just race.
Mhm.
And that's what has happened, and that's why I'm still a Rotarian as we sat here today. Past president and past assistant district governor for 76, 70.
Mhm.
So I applaud you for what you're doing, and I want to be as active with this and in this as I can be. So
Great.
I'll shut up.
I love to hear that. No, that's great. There's no need to shut up. So let's just maybe circle back to what we want this position to encompass. So far, I've got to promote diversity, equity, and inclusivity at the club level. As David said, to promote the integrity of the statement that it was just incorporated by Rotary, and you know, that ideally it should be a person who is designated and who is approachable and has empathy, and that people feel comfortable with, so that they can be assured that their grievances or concern will be met with understanding, and you know, will not be dismissed. Someone who can really tune into a situation. So far we have that. Do we think that we should attempt to put a presentation together so that this person can schedule a meeting at their club on, you know, in any of the upcoming weekly meeting that they have, and have a meaningful conversation with their members, with their constituents about what this initiative is.
Absolutely.
I think it would be very beneficial to put a program together for this new person to have some guidance. Otherwise, it's just going to be like floundering.
Right.
Right.
It's just, mm-hmm.
And it also
Absolutely.
provides a consistent message.
Yeah.
Exactly, consistency.
Yeah,
Right.
we need the same kinds of materials that we have for Shoulder Box, or we have for foundation, something that gives a clear, concise understanding of focus and objectives.
Would that be a printed piece, you think? Something to give to them to hand out? Or would it be a PowerPoint or?
Something they can take away. It can be converted into a PowerPoint, absolutely, but I think we have some advantage in things that can be taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we're going to have to do is make sure that we create a climate in our clubs where these people feel valued and welcomed.
You bet.
And again, that's that intentional thing that we must do. And that's how you do it, is with the presentations and creating that climate where people from any walk of life feel very comfortable and valued when they come to your club.
You know, as a part of a club meeting in the past, we've had a case where we had each member at some point in time tell something about themselves. But today, Rick, our president, instituted an idea out of the last Rotarian magazine, and that I like the more I think about it, and that is Rotarians are going to be asked to consider standing up and explaining what it feels like to, and to could be anything, you know, to be a homosexual, to walk at Selma, whatever. You could have any structure to make it something to, and I think that would tend to let us see each other with our shields down, you know.
Mm-hmm. Roger, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you had started saying something. Roger, was there something you wanted to?
I was just sharing when you were asking about the presentation.
Yeah.
That I just thought it would be very valuable in communicating a consistent message for the clubs and for the district.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. We should probably talk further about what we think we want that that presentation to include. You know, it seems. Let's see.
For the presentation, I look at a lot of different stuff on Rotary, so please forgive me if I'm wrong. There might be something in the Rotary Learning Center.
Yep.
So you might want to check that out on Rotary.org. The key to Rotary.org. Yeah, there you go.
I found this, which is, if you can't read it, it's diversifying your clubs. And I think it might be good if this person had some framework to start a conversation at the club level. And what this suggests here is that the conversation could start by conducting a diversity assessment within the club and having a conversation about with their members, you know, asking questions. Do you feel like we're representative of our community? Do you feel like we have diversity in our club? Do you feel that if someone who was a minority walked through the door, would they feel welcome? What is our culture in our club? And sort of part of that could be just very interactive, I guess. Here it says that, you know, the outcome of diversifying your club, it has three things. It has raising members' awareness of the diversity or lack of in their club, building member support for increasing diversity. Obviously, you have to have buy-in from the club, and then conveying the fact that a diverse club is a better representation of the community and is more inclusive and is a better reflection of who the working professionals are in the community. So it suggests here that someone should dedicate a time and have actually a series of club meetings about this.
Also, I think about some of these. I'm an AG right now over about 5, 6 clubs, counting satellites about 9. But I have one club, and when you were talking about doing the diversity assessment, there's one club that I have that they are about 100 members. They're all old white men, and there's only 4 women in this club. And whenever I go to this club, they treat me like I am trying to invade their secrecy or something. And I just, is there some way that, because honestly, I see if somebody goes into that club and talks about diversity, I mean, they're not going to be nice. I don't know. I don't know how to get to those type of clubs.
Right.
That was going to be my comment. Is you have to prepare the clubs for this conversation, and all clubs are not ready, and it's a tough conversation. Let's face it, and all clubs are not ready for it, and some of them will never be ready for it. But if it's what Rotary says we're going to do, then some folks need to get some education.
Right, and none of us are here willing to accept the status quo. You know, just because we don't think they'll be open today doesn't mean we don't try, and it doesn't mean we don't.
Oh, exactly.
You know, our job in some cases is not going to be to finish the work, but it's our obligation to move it forward, you know, to the extent
we just plant the seed and something else will come along and water it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it seems that this presentation it should set the stage for what the benefits are of having a diverse club, and then have maybe a small assessment piece to it that would be interactive with the members, and maybe some action items to leave them with in terms of how to be proactive in trying to become more diverse. And, you know, that touches on membership, and it touches on outreach, and it touches on every current member having an awareness of, as they go through their lives, to pick individuals in their sphere of influence or their circle of friends and coworkers that might make good Rotarians who also happen to be of a minority in some way. You know, that could be, maybe we need to keep it simple. And
yes,
right?
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah.
8 slides max, you know, 10 maybe.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, make the message short and sweet. I think I like Steve's comment about you're starting a conversation. We're not trying to end the conversation.
Right.
We're trying to start it. And we just want to, we're not gonna shove this down anybody's throat. We're opening the conversation up, and some clubs are gonna adopt it in full steam, and some clubs are gonna ignore it. And that's just the way it is. And that's the way it is with everything, with membership drives.
Oh, right.
With registering for pets, for foundation, whatever it is.
Right.
There's always going to be, there's clubs that do it, there's clubs that don't. So, but I think we're starting a conversation. I think that's a very real step and an important step.
Okay.
Another
I agree
action.
with you, David. I also think that,
go ahead, Tammy.
Okay, go ahead.
what I was going to say was, I agree with you, David. They're not going to accept, not everybody's going to accept it. Not everybody's going to listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this,
one thing we could ask one thing we could ask the equity officer in a club to do is to, after they've done their presentation for the year, or what, other things they've done. I think it would be useful if they would at least once a year, maybe twice, provide a report to the district DEI chair, and which would allow the chair to compile some a district level report to provide to the sitting governor, so that the governor can present something on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
What do you think the content of the report should be?
Maybe certainly something demographic, see some demographic data, if we've got it, with any kind of subjective reporting where our club we got some tonight, from Robert. Our club was once very diverse and now we are not as diverse. Things like that, those kinds of feedback, getting that from the clubs is really useful information from a leadership standpoint, especially when you're trying to set your vision and tone for the year and you're trying to respond to things. Nobody can know everything about every club. So it's really helpful if that information comes up to, through the committee to the governor and the council.
What if instead of
it could be presented also, that information?
Yeah. What if instead of being a report, it was a short survey that I could send out to this designated person, asking strategic questions?
Yeah.
Do you feel your club has become more diverse in the past year? Do you maybe?
Yeah.
And my experience with surveys is they have to be short or people don't do it. People don't.
David, David, can I throw a brick in your pool?
No.
Oh, please.
No.
I got to thinking, we haven't seen the pink pages for this governor's year yet. And I'm thinking at the end of your governor's year, or maybe for your governor's year, you may want to include 3 or 4 points in the pink pages that deal with: have you named a DEI chair? Have you had at least one meeting covering diversity and equity? Have you, 3 or 4 or 5 points worth 5-10 points each that would contribute toward their pink page score?
Okay.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I'll look at that.
That's a really good idea, actually, Robert, I think. And it's not necessarily instead of the survey or the report, but it
in addition to.
In my
And
experience.
David, maybe there's something me, you, and Ken could also get together and discuss this so that there's continuity between your governor year, Ken's governor year, and my governor year.
Yes.
I hear someone talking about demographics, but I think we also need to ask the question: what are you doing? What's your action plan?
Yep.
All those things are things that we have to include. We can't just look at demographics and say, this is how we look. Okay, what are we doing to promote? What are we doing to recruit? What are we doing to retain?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Short survey.
What kind of events have we had? What kind of presentations have we had?
Yep.
Absolutely. Intentional things.
Right. Yeah, I don't think, I don't mean to scare you off with a report. The idea of a report, it can be very simple.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you don't have to write it. I'm not looking for a 10-page paper here.
Yeah. I just think if you don't put some parameters out on what information it is you want, you're going to get very different responses from different people. That some of them will take the time, some of them will not take the time at all to share anything about you. I was thinking if you were to ask 3 or 4 questions, like Robert is saying, it would be more cohesive in terms of gathering the metrics or gathering the data. rather than to leave it up to them to send a report that would be more like an essay or much more subjective, I guess.
You know, before Isaac
I agree
came,
with you.
before Isaac came to make his club visits, he asked each of the presidents to write up a brag sheet on their club.
Yep.
And I'm not so sure with respect to DEI, some sort of a brag sheet wouldn't be an appropriate thing.
Mm-hmm. David, are you planning to do the same thing Tiffany did, which was to try and hit the clubs early on in your mandate, in your tenure? You know, she was trying to schedule a lot of her official club visits last summer, right after she, you know, she took the lead for the district. Do you know what your schedule is going to look like?
Yeah, my club visits will be completed before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So I'll have visited every club before Thanksgiving.
Great. Yeah, you know, I think it would be.
They begin in August.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So by the time you're done with all your visits, ideally every club would have a person in place by the time you visit them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideal. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just in the interest
It's probably
of
a
time,
board level position too.
Absolutely.
so in the interest of time, because this is only one part of what our group's you know, action item list should be. When I spoke with Tiffany this morning, we also discussed other ways to raise awareness. Obviously, designating a DEI chair in every club is a big part of it. But what other things can this group do to raise awareness? In particular, you know, Tiffany and I were talking about whether we could write a monthly article to be published in the district newsletter that would address some aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Could we could we gather success stories that we could talk about at the district level? For instance, in my club, we just inducted last week an Indian American lady who's a neighbor of mine, and she's been coming for a while, and she finally joined, and she's our first Indian American.
Is that native Indian or is that India?
Indian, yes.
Indian. Okay.
Asian Indian, yeah.
Okay.
I do like the idea of personal stories too.
Great.
For individuals to share kind of their Rotary experience. I think that's very powerful to put a name and a face to someone's experience as it relates to.
Right. And Roger, do you think there would be any value in maybe conducting a kind of like an interview with the person, first identifying, you know, who the featured spotlight should be on, and any idea on what 2, 3, 4 questions they could be asked that we could build an article around them or a feature story?
You know, the district governor.
Roger, I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just going to ask Roger to speak to that. I can tell he's got ideas. Thanks, Steve.
Well, I don't have specific ideas, but I do like your idea. You know, to have some type of format. Don't know if it would go along with, you know, anything that's been done previously for those types of features, or if it's something that you would create new. But yeah, I like the idea of a formatted question and answer type format, or otherwise. I think you.
We could call it something like the many faces of Rotary, you know, or something like that. And
or just what does a Rotarian look like?
Yeah, something like that. We could fine tune it, sort of a catchy catchphrase that this could be featured in, and then we would need to solicit not only this group but also our DEI chairs to feed us that information, you know, to be communicative with us. If there's someone like in my club, for instance, this month that joins the club who fits that demographic, that you know, we need to find a way to know about them. And
and I don't think we need to try too hard. And when I say that sort of tongue in cheek, in the sense that let the people get in the club and get feeling comfortable. Don't be parading them around like this is
right. Don't bring the camera in their face.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So be very careful with that, because that will turn people off quicker than anything else. Let them get in. Let them get in and get their feet wet, and then have a conversation with them. See how they feel about you doing that. Don't just do it.
Yeah, and you know, the reality is, even though we're trying to promote diversity, many of our clubs are already diverse to some degree, and there could very well be 20 individuals who've been in Rotary for 20 years who fit the demographics that could be asked.
Absolutely.
Where they wouldn't feel like they're being descended upon or being paraded as the token XYZ person. Right. You know. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there's some buy-in for that. What do you all think about creating an environment where we can also partner with other organizations in their efforts to promote, you know, civil rights, equal rights, inclusivity, etc. For instance, I am on another group that is the Jewish Community Relations Council that combats anti-Semitism, and we've been unfortunately pretty active of late. We go into schools, we do symposia, we do things like that. There's a rally being organized for the end of February where it's a no fear, no hate rally. Would it make sense for the rallies to raise awareness against racism and discrimination and bias and anti-Semitism? Would it make sense for us to be the body that distributes this information so that a Rotary could maybe participate in some way? You know, would it make sense to go out in the community as Rotarians who believe in the importance of diversity and, you know, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think we, I mean, on some groups, maybe, other groups, maybe not, but yeah. It's a matter of Rotary remains, ideally, Rotary is, it's secular and apolitical. Okay. And so we have to be really careful about who we tie our boat to because of that. And there are not a lot of organizations that maintain that, and sometimes we don't do such a good job, in my opinion. Right. And so I think really part of this group should be to try and emphasize the importance of staying apolitical, completely outside of political spheres, and not endorsing any religion, and because that's not what Rotary is about. So no, that would be the caveat I would put out there.
Sure, and I'm not suggesting that we do that. You know, an initiative like that rally are basically speaking out in public against issues that are rampant right now that don't affect just a religious group. You know, they affect they affect people across the board. You know, whether it's race related, religion related, gender related, you know. So anyway, we certainly don't need to focus on that.
Gaia.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think let me say one more thing, Robert. Just before we, another thing to consider before we did that would be that you would want the buy-in from the district council and other leaders in the district before you disseminated anything like that, because
Okay.
I don't think you want to corrode the, you don't want to mess this, you don't want to muddy the water.
Okay.
And you've got a we have a really good idea going here, and I think we just got to be careful that we.
Okay. So for now, keep
don't
it
make it too
internal.
Well,
Keep it to
keep it
our
simple.
own awareness.
as part of our developing
Right.
elevator sales pitch points for diversity, when we have something, one of those things that develops a good focus, it would not hurt to have ambassadors to the community at large take those things outside of Rotary. Like David says, when they have general acceptance, go ahead and share them with the community at large, because as you well know, guys, there are not enough people in any given arena that are willing to step up and say, this is how I feel, this is what I see.
Yep.
And we need to be out front of that as leaders of the community.
Okay. All right. Well, so far, I think what's emerging as sort of the dual purpose is this implementation of the position at the club level, and then giving that person the tools so that they can effectively raise awareness within their club, and alongside possibly having a presence in the district newsletter with some column or monthly showcase or article. Is that pretty much, does anyone have any other ideas on what the scope of this committee should be? You know, we're still very much in the infancy here, and still defining what we want our purpose to be.
Well, I like to go back to what we said earlier about starting the conversation, because as we've heard with other clubs, some of these conversations have never been had before. In some of them, you know, you're preaching to the choir, kind of a thing. So I want to go back to, you had mentioned something, Gaia, and rattled it off pretty, and I made a note of it. To do the elevator pitch, the benefits of a diverse club, and then the assessment of the club, I think that could be valuable for any club. What's the benefits? What are you going to, how is that going to benefit you? How is it going to help you? And then the assessment of that club, you know, even going as far as maybe accessing census data for that particular zip code, for that particular area. It's like, okay, here's what your area looks like. What does your club look like?
Right.
And say, are you representative of that? And and what does that mean for you? I think sometimes even going to that level, saying, okay, well, here's what your community looks like, because sometimes we don't see it. Sometimes we're in our rut between work and home and the grocery store and different meetings, and we don't see exactly what our community is comprised of. And I think that could be a valuable, and that could be a great conversation starter about, this is you, this is your community, this is your place.
Yeah,
so,
and you actually hit it right on the head, Tammy, because in that diversifying your club piece from Rotary, the first step they suggest is to discuss the benefits of having diversity and to make a case for why it's important. And the second step is collect information, and they suggest here that the club get data on demographics for their community, and they can do that from the local business association, chamber of commerce, etc. And secondly, that they gather cultural information and demographic information on the composition, and that they can do that from their local tourism bureau. socioeconomic statistics from the local economics development board, and census results, which could include, you know, what is the average age of the person who lives in your community, what is the gender makeup, what is the ethnic makeup, and then bring all that back to the club and have a conversation about whether there's a discrepancy with their constituency, as opposed, you know, when you stack it up to what their community looks like. So that was step 3, is to discuss the findings. And then step 4, to discuss the implications of their findings, and then to develop a member diversity action plan. And that speaks to what someone said earlier about how some clubs have never had this conversation, and some clubs you might be preaching to the choir. So maybe their action plan would differ depending on where they fall on that continuum, you know. Some clubs might need to do very little because they already are hospitable and welcoming of all, regardless of who they are, as long as they make good Rotarians, right? And other clubs might have to start the conversation with, we have 100 members and 4 women, you know, and so that,
I'll throw one at you to consider.
Yeah.
Between Marion, North Carolina, and Taylorsville, North Carolina. In that demographic area is the largest Hmong population in the United States outside of Minnesota. How many Hmong do you have in your clubs?
Okay, Taylorsville. Yeah, I mean, that's a good example. Yeah, and if you find that you don't have any, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And that's the action plan.
The other one we struck for was Latinos, but our guys both dropped out because of divorces. But anyhow, there are other things that are going to mitigate against their staying in.
Okay.
You know, historically, the membership growth model that Rotary has followed is at odds with what we're trying to do, because the test used to be find somebody who looks like you and somebody who could be your best friend and invite them to Rotary. Well, you know, you're not going to get much diversity that way. You're going to get more of what you got.
It's time to be more intentional about it. And, you know, one of the reasons I was suggesting the membership chair at the beginning of our meeting is that the membership chair is tasked with the outreach for the club and with locating new potential members. And I feel that person could play a pretty pivotal role in where their attention is focused and where their resources are focused. And, you know, for instance, when a club does a membership drive, where is it publicized? You know, who knows about it? Who intentionally picks up the phone to call, you know,
to reach out.
Right.
Agreed.
Right. Okay. All right. Well,
yeah, Guy, this is great. This is just wonderful to have this. And I think, you know, keeping it simple to start with, it seems simple, but it's not. I mean, getting these chairs in these clubs is going to be, that's a pretty good lift.
Right.
And once you get those chairs in the clubs and you've got some points of contact and you can deploy this presentation, I mean, that right there, that is a very good goal.
Well, if we could achieve that during your tenure, I think it would be progress.
Awesome.
You know? And I think
awesome.
it's helpful for all of us to know that we're not going to fix something that's plagued the organization for as long as we've all been alive overnight. But that it's, you know, it's crucial that we put a dent in it and that we start, like Tammy was saying, planting seeds, whether or not we ever see anything grow ourselves, you know, to know that we did it. And so
That's right.
I'll work on this. I believe this meeting is being recorded so that Tiffany can look at it later and edit it and upload it to YouTube. I'm seeing the little recording red light going there. She asked me to start recording, but it was already working when I logged on. So I'm assuming we recorded. I did take some notes, so hopefully that'll help her out as well. So I'll start fleshing out a an outline for what we want the job description to look like.
Guy, are you online during the day, during the week?
Am I online? Yeah.
During the day, during the week, you can be reached?
Yeah, anytime.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
Well, I think this is a huge step in the right direction. I think this is huge for Rotary.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. And I'm so grateful that that you all are here. I really am, because I have to remind myself that sometimes you don't have to know exactly where you're headed to take the first step, and that with enough faith, the road will rise up to meet us. When I talked to Tiffany and I texted yesterday, and she told me yesterday none of us had signed up yet. And I was thinking, okay, it's going to be a pretty boring meeting if it's just me talking to myself. And I'm just so ever so grateful that you guys are here. And I hope that you will indulge us, as it were, as we figure out who we are and, find our way through this and really decide as a group where we should focus our attention. It's too soon really to start assigning tasks. I feel like what we need to do now is something I can jot, but I'd like to, by the next meeting, if there are ways to identify what some of us can do to divide and conquer, if we decide that these down the road, for instance, that we want to place a phone call with the chairs that we will have identified by then, I probably will reach out to you all and ask to do that. We're so inundated, all of us, with emails and various means of communication. I sometimes feel that picking up the phone and having a 5-minute conversation with, whether it's a membership chair or a DEI chair, would go a long way. So I hope that you'll still be there to help. We'll be setting up another meeting. David, before you go, when is PETS? What are the dates for PETS?
March 5th through 7th.
March 5th through 7th. Okay. All right.
I'm gonna throw one more thing in, and then I'm gonna.
Key day I want to remember is May 16th.
Okay. Yes, I wrote that down.
May 16th is the Vibrant Club training. I think we're going to have a breakout session for DEI.
Okay, May 16th. Yeah, I wrote that down somewhere last time. Robert, you were saying something?
Yeah. Oh, that was Steve. That was Steve.
Go ahead, Steve.
Once we identify these people who are going to take on the roles,
yeah,
it's imperative for us to have a training session with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's imperative that that happens, because we got to have a conversation with them, so they know where they're going and what they're doing. And I think that's, in order for this to be successful, that has to happen.
Yeah. And once we have a better idea of what the job description is, it'll be easier to tell them what we want them to do.
Steve, that's what I'm thinking for what we call the Vibrant Club training in May, where we bring all the club leaders in and they train like your secretaries and your foundation chair and your membership chair and so on.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll just have we'll have these diversity chairs, and we'll have a session for them as well.
Awesome.
Good.
I think it would be good also to convey to them, you're the first of your kind. This signifies a new era for Rotary. This is us turning a corner and becoming intentional and proactive. knowing that with all matters of social injustice, whenever you're quiet and silent, you're siding with the oppressor, and we're no longer siding with the oppressor. You know, I mean, get a little radical here, but we're being intentional about, if I were to use the analogy of a tent or a shelter, we're wanting to make that shelter and that tent as wide as it can possibly be, so that anyone and everyone who believes and embraces the ideals of Rotary feels welcome, you know, and really make it symbolic that they're the first in Rotary's history. And, you know, perhaps that if they could all be identified ahead of you conducting your official club meetings, David, what if there was some mini ceremony that where a pin gets given or some sort of recognition for this new position, so that they get visibility? We can create social media around it. You know, I think personally Rotary has had a PR crisis on its hands for years, and you know, our image is not, our image has had challenges, and I think this group has a big role to play in helping our public image, because you know, people have a lot of preconceived ideas about what we are, and frankly those ideas are grounding in a lot of truth, that things that used to be true that are no longer true, and we don't want to be true. So maybe we can have that as an objective, David, as you go about your meetings this summer and into the fall, that you give those people a personal touch. Yeah. All right. Well, it's after 8 o'clock. Unless anyone has anything else pressing to share, which is fine, you can have the floor for a few minutes. I'd like to adjourn and plan on reconvening at the end of March after David goes through pets, and he might have some things to report as well at that time.
No February meeting?
Do we want to have a February meeting? That's fine. Yeah.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, let's do that actually. Let's have a February meeting. I think I was trying to think of whether I could have this outlined together by then, but I can. Yeah. And I think Tiffany will have to help me with the logistics, but what I'd like to do is send you all out, you know, a preliminary version of it, so that you can read it ahead of the meeting, and we can continue fine-tuning it as it relates to the job description for the DEI chair.
You have all the contact information for our folks from the registration for this meeting, so you should be.
Yes, that's what Tiffany told me. I don't know that I personally have it, but she's able to.
It's there.
She can sign in as the she can sign in as the district person and
she can get it.
So, all right, sounds good. Is there anything else?
Nope.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you all again for participating in this very important discussion, and I wish you a great evening, and we'll set a meeting for the middle of February, and we'll reconvene.
Very good.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you all.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.